It was the last weekend of October, the kind of weekend where the air feels heavier than usual, thick with unspoken promises, as if the night itself is waiting for something. I decided to spend it alone at my grandfather's old farmhouse. The place sat miles away from the nearest light, a forgotten relic hidden between dying trees and an endless gravel road that twisted into the fog. It hadn't been touched in years. No electricity, no phone signal, just silence. When I stepped inside, the air was cold, dry, and smelled of dust and decay. The wooden floor moaned beneath my feet, groaning under a weight that was more than just mine, like it remembered every step my grandfather ever took. I lit a candle. The flickering glow painted the walls with strange moving shadows. The entire house seemed to breathe, slow, heavy, alive. That night, I couldn't sleep. The wind scraped against the window like fingernails. Somewhere deep in the house, a clock ticked, slow and uneven. Then I heard it, 3 knocks. They came from beneath the floor. At first I froze. I told myself it was the pipes, old wood, maybe a mouse. Any rational explanation to quiet the fear coiling in my gut. But then it came again, 3 knocks. Pause. Then 3 more. My heart began to thump in rhythm with the sound. It wasn't random, it was deliberate, like someone trying to get my attention. I grabbed my flashlight and followed the sound into the living room. Every time I took a step, the knocking moved too, directly beneath me. It was like something was crawling under the house, matching my pace, toying with me. And then I heard it. A whisper, soft and cold as breath against glass.
Let me in.
I froze. The cellar door was slightly open, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me, that I had locked it earlier. I remembered the scrape of the heavy iron bolt. It was moving now, slow and creaking, as if someone was pushing from the other side. The candlelight flickered violently. The air turned freezing cold. And then, from the dark gap under the door, I saw it. A hand. Pale. Still. Reaching upward through the floorboards. I stumbled backward, nearly dropping my flashlight. The hand twitched. Then it vanished back into the black. I slammed the cellar door shut and locked it. The knocking started again, louder this time, faster. It sounded desperate, furious. Something down there wanted out. I grabbed my car keys and ran to the front door. But when I opened it, I froze. There on the porch were muddy footprints. They didn't lead away from the door. They led inside. I turned slowly, feeling something behind me, a shift in the air, a shadow that wasn't mine. The candle went out, plunging the room into absolute blackness. For a moment, there was only the sound of my own ragged breathing. Then, right behind my ear, a whisper.
You shouldn't have opened it.
I ran. I didn't even look back. I locked myself in the car, watching the house through the windshield as the fog rolled in. Every window in that house, dark. Every door, closed. But from the cellar, a faint, dull thumping echoed, like something still moving, trying to escape. Morning finally came. When I returned with the sheriff, the cellar door was open again. Inside the crawl space, the dirt had been disturbed, fresh as if someone had clawed their way out. They found nothing, just an old wooden box buried under the floor. Inside, a photograph of a man I didn't recognize, and written on the back in faded ink, "Break time 1. He's already inside." The sheriff called it an old house settling. But I know what I heard. I never went back. It was supposed to be a quiet weekend camping trip. The kind you plan when the city starts to feel like it's closing in. 4 of us, me, my cousin Aaron, and 2 of our friends, had decided to drive out deep into the national forest. We wanted a break from the noise, the city lights, and the people. We craved the kind of silence you can only find miles from anywhere. By the time we reached the old logging road, it was already dark. The pavement had given way to mud, and we were officially on our own. The trees stood like tall shadows, swallowing the car's headlights. They felt like walls, hemming us in. The rain had started again, soft at first, then heavier, tapping on the windshield in a slow, eerie rhythm. We found a clearing near a small lake, surrounded by pine trees. The air was cold and still, heavy with the smell of damp earth, and every sound, even our voices, seemed to echo. We set up 2 tents and built a small fire. Everything was normal, until the fire began to flicker strangely, the flames shrinking as if shying away from the darkness. I looked toward the lake. The surface was black like glass, and something, I swear, was rippling just beneath it, though the air was perfectly still. It wasn't a splash, but a slow, deliberate disturbance. Aaron laughed it off. "Fish, maybe," he said. But there were no fish that deep in the forest. No one even came out here anymore. The old maps confirmed it. That night, as we lay in our tents, I couldn't sleep. The rain had stopped, but the forest wasn't quiet. All the usual night sounds, the crickets, the rustling of small animals, were gone. It was too quiet. A heavy, listening silence. Then I heard it, a faint rustling just outside our tent. Slow, deliberate footsteps in the wet grass. At first I thought it was Aaron going to the car, but the steps didn't move away. They were heavy, dragging slightly. They circled the tent. Once, twice, then stopped right beside my head. I held my breath, my heart hammering. The fabric of the tent brushed slightly inward, like someone's hand was pressing against it. I could feel the pressure of a palm, just inches from my face.
Do you hear that?
Yeah, stay still. The footsteps started again. But this time, they weren't outside anymore. They were between our tents. I could hear wet shoes squelching softly on the mud, a sound that made my blood run cold. Then came the worst sound, a low whisper. It wasn't words, just a sound, long, drawn out, almost like breathing, but with a wet, gurgling quality to it. We stayed awake until dawn, frozen, listening to the silence that followed. When morning came, we dared to look. There were no footprints around the tents, not a single one, just the rain-soaked ground and the sound of wind moving through the pines. It made no sense. That night, we decided to leave, but as we were packing up, our hands clumsy with fear, Aaron pointed toward the lake. There, across the lake, were 2 dim lights. They hadn't been there before. At first I thought they were flashlights, but they weren't moving. They were steady, glowing faintly like lanterns hung in the trees, casting a weak yellow light. We stared at them for nearly a minute before one of them blinked out. Not like a switch, but like a candle being snuffed. Then the other. That night, we drove home in silence. It was a silence thick with unspoken questions. None of us talked about what happened until years later. A forest ranger told me there had been an old campsite on the other side of the lake, abandoned after a disappearance 20 years ago. He said it was a strange case. 3 campers went missing one night. Their tents were found zipped shut from the inside. And the only thing left behind was a lantern, still burning. He said there were 2, actually, one for each tent. One was still lit, the other cold, just like the lights we saw. I never told him what we saw. I didn't have to. Sometimes, on quiet nights, I still think about that lake and the footsteps that left no prints. I think about the whispers that weren't words, and I think about those 2 lights burning like a memory on the far shore. A quiet invitation or a silent warning, waiting in the dark for the next campers who wander too far from the road. It was the middle of November when I moved into the small apartment on the edge of town. The town itself felt forgotten. My new building, the Crestview, was a grim brick monolith. It had a damp, musty smell that clung to everything, a mix of old paper and dust that gets into your clothes. The building was old, built sometime in the 1950s, judging from the cracked wallpaper and the brass doorknobs that looked like they hadn't been replaced in decades. Still, the rent was cheap, and I was desperate. The landlord, a quiet older man named Richard, handed me the keys without saying much. He had watery, pale eyes that never met mine. He only gave me one warning as I signed the lease: don't mess with the doors. When I asked what he meant by his warning, he just shook his head. A quirk of the building, he mumbled. Old places have rules. I thought he was joking. But that night, I realized what he meant. The first few days were fine. The apartment was small but cozy. One bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and a creaky hallway that led to the bathroom. I settled in, and the building's groans became almost comforting. Everything felt normal. Until the fourth night. That peace was a fragile illusion. I woke up around 3 a.m. to the sound of dripping water. The dripping was persistent, a slow, steady that seemed to drill directly into my skull. I got up, turned on the light, and followed the sound. But it wasn't coming from the sink or the bathroom. It was coming from the hallway. That's when I noticed something strange. At the end of the hallway, between the bathroom and the kitchen, there was a door that hadn't been there before. My mind raced for a logical explanation. Had I somehow missed it? Impossible. I walked that hallway a dozen times a day. It was old, the wood swollen with moisture, paint peeling off. It looked ancient, waterlogged, as if salvaged from a shipwreck. And it was slightly open. I froze. I had lived there for almost a week. I knew there were only 3 doors in that apartment. The main door, the bedroom, and the bathroom. This one shouldn't exist. I reached out and touched the knob. It was freezing cold. A smell wafted from the crack of a damp basement of wet earth and decay. From inside, I could hear a faint dripping, steady, rhythmic, like water falling onto concrete. When I pushed the door open, a wave of damp, cold air brushed across my face. The door swung inward with a low groan. The darkness within was absolute, swallowing the hallway light just feet in. The light from the hallway barely reached inside. It looked like another hallway, stretching far beyond where my apartment should have ended. The walls were concrete, wet, covered in something dark. And that dripping, it wasn't water. It sounded heavier, thicker, like blood. I stepped back, heart pounding, and slammed the door shut. The sound stopped instantly. The latch's click was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. But when I turned around, the hallway was darker than before. The bulb above me was flickering, buzzing like it was about to die. I scrambled to my bedroom, locking the door, a useless gesture. I went back to my room and stayed up until morning. When daylight came through the blinds, I checked again. The door was gone, just a blank stretch of wall. In the morning, I ran my hands over the smooth, uninterrupted wall. I almost convinced myself it had been a dream. Until that night. At 3 a.m. sharp, I woke to the sound again. Not dripping this time. Knocking. Slow, deliberate knocks coming from the wall where the door had been. It wasn't aggressive. It was patient. 3 soft thuds, a pause, then 3 more. I called the landlord the next day, demanding an explanation. My call to Richard was frantic. He was silent for a while, then said, "You shouldn't have opened it." His voice was a dry whisper, full of resignation before he hung up. That night, I decided to record everything. I set my phone to record video, propped it up facing the hallway, and left the light on. At 3 a.m., I woke again, to the same knocks. When I checked the footage in the morning, I felt my stomach drop. I fast-forwarded through hours of an empty hallway. Then at 3:03 a.m., the wall shimmered and the door materialized. The video showed the hallway and the door, wide open, and for 5 full minutes something was standing inside. The figure was a distortion, a tall, slender silhouette that drank the light around it. Tall, motionless, watching. When I looked up from the screen, the door was gone again, but the wall looked different now, slightly darker. The wallpaper there was now bubbled and warped, stained with a faint, dark moisture that hadn't been there before. I pressed my ear against it and felt a faint, low-frequency hum, like something was pressing against it from the other side. That was 2 nights ago. For 2 days, there was nothing but the stained wall and the gnawing fear. I haven't slept, and tonight, the knocking has started again. It's not in the hallway anymore, only now, it's coming from my bedroom. The sound is coming from the wall right behind my bed. It knows where I am. The motel sat at the edge of a forgotten highway, a narrow, cracked stretch of road where no one drove anymore. The main interstate was closed, forcing me onto this forgotten artery. Its neon sign flickered weakly through the mist. Vacancy. It was less an invitation and more a last resort. I pulled in just past midnight, rain pouring so hard I could barely see. Inside, the air was thick and stagnant. The clerk looked half asleep, his eyes glassy and unfocused. He didn't ask for my name. He slid me a key labeled Room 9, muttered something I couldn't quite hear, and went back to staring at a small TV behind the counter, which was just displaying snow. The place reeked of old cigarettes and damp carpet. I was exhausted, so I didn't care about the smell or the clerk's strange detachment. All I wanted was a bed and a few hours of quiet. But the night had other plans. Room 9 was small and cold, the air holding a chill that had nothing to do with the storm. It held a single bed, an old wooden desk, a flickering lamp, and a dusty radio sitting by the window. It looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. I tossed my bag down, kicked off my boots, and collapsed on the bed. That's when I heard it, a faint crackle from the radio. It wasn't on.
At first, I thought it might just be static interference from the storm, but the sound was too clean, too close. Then, I heard a voice, a man's voice, low, calm, whispering, "Turn it off."
I froze. I pushed myself up, my eyes fixed on the dusty box. And that's when I saw the cord, coiled neatly behind it. The radio was unplugged. A cold dread, sharp and immediate, washed over me. I waited, but the voice didn't return. The silence felt heavy. I forced myself to laugh it off, told myself I was half asleep, that the long drive was playing tricks on my mind. And eventually, I drifted into a restless doze. But at 3:07 a.m., the static started again. It wasn't faint this time. It was a harsh, insistent hiss. Louder this time. I sat up, staring at the radio, and through the white noise I heard that same calm voice whisper,
"You shouldn't be here."
Every hair on my body stood up. The rain outside had stopped. Everything was dead silent, except the soft, impossible hum of that old radio, a low thrum I could feel in my teeth. I scrambled out of bed, grabbed the radio, and shoved it into the closet, burying it under a spare blanket. But the whisper followed, faintly, like it was now inside the room itself. Panic set in. I grabbed my phone to call the front desk, my fingers fumbling with the screen. I had to do something, but my signal was gone. A single damning phrase, no service. I was completely cut off. Then, a knock at the door. 3 slow, heavy, deliberate knocks that vibrated through the floor. My heart leaped into my throat. When I looked through the peephole, there was nothing, not the dim corridor light, just darkness. I stepped back, heart pounding, and turned to face the room again. My blood ran cold. The radio was sitting back on the table, in the exact same spot, still unplugged, still humming.
A new voice came through, this time a woman. Her tone was softer, trembling, frayed with terror. She whispered, "He's in the next room."
I felt my chest tighten. The wall behind the bed groaned, a low, guttural sound, like someone was pressing their hands against it. Then the radio screamed with high-pitched static, and every light in the room flickered violently before dying out. For a moment, everything went black. The silence that followed was absolute. When the lights returned, the radio was gone. The only thing left on the table was a motel key, its tarnished brass tag engraved Room 10. The clerk swore the next morning that Room 10 had been sealed shut for years. I told him about the radio, about the key, His face showed a flicker of fear. No guests, no lights, no power to that room, he admitted. When I asked why, he just said one word: voices. If you enjoyed these stories, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more. Your support helps me bring more of these unsettling tales out from the shadows. If you have a story that you think I should tell, send it in. I'm always searching for those personal encounters with the unexplained. The submission details are below. You never know, your story might be featured next time, shared with everyone who gathers here in the dark. Slight pause, low ambient. Thanks for watching, and remember, not every nightmare ends when you wake up. Some are just beginning.